Mr. Davis. I guess I was told a few minutes ago that if I prolonged things and had a filibuster, I might remain chairman for a little longer. I resisted the temptation, and I will be very brief. We'd like to start things off today with a few remarks about the Commission as an institution. In the time that I've spent here, there are a few key words that come to mind when I think of that subject. First of all, quality. Quality in the job the Commission does in carrying out its duties to administer and enforce the securities laws. The quality of the staff that assists the commissioners in doing that job. Cooperation is another term. Certainly the cooperation between the staff and the commissioners. Most recently, we had such a very relationship in working out a proposal for a definition of insider trading. But that's only an example because that happens all the time in what we do here. A third term that describes the Commission as an institution to me is stability. Certainly the stability of the staff, the ideas that lie behind the job that we do, really makes the terms that I read of now and then of the Commission being deregulatory or whether the Commission is pro-regulatory kind of meaningless. I think that it's all in the eye of the beholder because we have a job to do. We take account the realities of the securities markets and do our job in that context. It really doesn't make much sense to talk about a deregulatory commission where there have been areas that are realistic to be scaled back. It's been done. Where there are areas in which it's realistic to increase regulation, that's been done. Finally, the term that comes to mind is the idea of a pervasive influence. Certainly, we have a pervasive influence, more than just within this building. But the fact that so many members of the securities bar spent time at the SEC, I really think carries the influence of the Commission beyond the walls of this building, and beyond those walls in more than just our straight regulatory manner, but in the way that the securities markets work, and in the way that the securities laws work. I think that pervasiveness probably explains the high level of disclosure, the high level of honesty and integrity that goes on in the securities markets and wherever people who have come in contact with the SEC impact those markets. Now, it's well known that so many people come here to learn the securities laws and then go out for a career with the securities bar. It's always that way. Certainly today, we have the reverse. David Reuter has spent his career analyzing, studying the securities laws, and now he's come to join the Commission. You'll be honored and pleased with that addition. I'd like to ask Commissioner Joe Grunfest to offer a few remarks at this point. Joe?
Charles? I've been asked to address the role of commissioners at the Securities and Exchange Commission, so I'll be brief. I begin, as one always does, with the language of the relevant statute. Section 4 of the Securities Exchange Act of 1934 forbids commissioners from, and I quote, engaging in any other business, vocation, or employment other than that of serving as commissioner. Thus, whatever it is that commissioners do, they must do only that. To be a commissioner, one must take a vow of abstinence fidelity and be true only to the Commission's work. This is not, however, all bad news. For example, when my wife asks me to make myself useful around the house, I explained that such employment could violate the Commission's Organic Act. Under Section 32 of the Act, such violations could subject me to fines of up to $100,000 and imprisonment for up to 5 years for each infraction. Needless to say, I have repeatedly been forced and or enticed to violate Section 4. By now, I am probably liable for aggregate penalties not to exceed the national debt of Brazil, and imprisonment for a period not to exceed the length of a fully adjudicated non-public 2E proceeding. If one next examines Reorganization Plan number 10 of 1950, one learns that all executive and administrative functions of the Commission have, for the past 37 years, been removed from the Commissioners and vested solely in the Chairman. Thus, the Chairman has sole authority regarding appointments, the distribution of business, and the use or expenditure of all Commission funds. Reorganization Plan number 10, it makes you wonder, by the way, about plans 1 through 9, is kind enough to reserve for the individual commissioners authority over any personnel employed regularly and full-time in the immediate offices of the commissioners. General Counsel has, however, narrowly construed the term immediate offices to include only the area within 2 feet of any commissioner's desk. Accordingly, under Reorganization Plan 10, each commissioner has authority only over his or her own actions taken at his or her own desk. The exercise of any other authority by a commissioner is both questionable and potentially dangerous. Well, between the power vested in the chairman and the functions allocated to the staff, it would seem that there really isn't very much for a commissioner to do, except perhaps speak at an occasional swearing-in ceremony and vote with the chairman in favor of all staff recommendations at all open and closed commission meetings. This perspective is not, however, fully accurate. There are a variety of useful functions that commissioners perform, both for staff and the chairman. In particular, commissioners are useful for providing bagels at all-day Sunday meetings involving the definition of insider trading. For everyone's information, we've learned that Commissioners Peters and Cox prefer cinnamon raisin to onion, garlic, poppy, and sesame. This news comes as a shocking blow to us all. Commissioners are also valuable as speakers at functions at which the chairman cannot attend. Finally, and perhaps most significantly, commissioners are valuable as proponents of foolish positions that need to be rectified by wiser chairmen and staff, so that at a minimum, the chairman and the staff look very good. All of which brings me to the proximate cause of this gathering, the pending investiture of David Ruder as chairman of the Securities and Exchange Commission. On this most auspicious occasion, I'd like to share with the incoming chairman some wise advice that Henry Kissinger offered shortly after I took this job. Henry and I grew up in the same Washington Heights neighborhood in northern Manhattan. And Henry called shortly after I was sworn in, and he said, "Joe, now you are an executive in the federal government. As an executive, you and your organization will have a staff. There is something very, very important you must know about staffs in the federal government. No matter what the problem, they will always give you 2 options. There will be their way and nuclear war. Your job as a commissioner is to avoid nuclear war." With that, thank you very much.
I have to describe a superhuman job, 2 full-time jobs, truly, both as Chief Executive Officer and as both Director and Chairman of the Board of an organization that I guess for the coming fiscal year will have a budget of something in excess of 150 million. We would all agree, I think, that the chairman is both the motivating and the guiding force of this agency. The guiding force in that the goals are set, the initiatives are directed, the programs are implemented as he fixes them, and I suppose it's also fair to say, that the calendar is set by the chairman. The motivating force in that the tone at the top, to use a recent commissioner's word, is sounded, the team spirit, the elan of this agency is evoked, and the agency's professional pride is supported by the chairman. And I suppose in that connection, it's also fair to say that the stick is applied and the carrot dangled by the chairman. Thinking over the chairman of the past 3.5 decades, whom Mr. Reuter and I have known together, and that list is long. Demler, Armstrong, Gadsby, Carey, Cohen, Casey, down through Garrett, Hills, Williams, and Shadd. It seems to me that the person our new chairman most resembles had a very deep knowledge of the securities law, a fundamental understanding of the people working with him, a keen awareness of the direction of the agency's development, a broad view of the role that healthy markets and capital formation play in our nation and in our world, and an astounding ability to bring contending participants to a common focus of effort. And that person, of course, is himself. And we are very lucky, I think, as do you all, to have David S. Reuter, our incoming chairman. For the official welcoming into the company of those pledged to preserve, protect, and defend, it's my honor to introduce to you Justice Antonin Scalia, quondam lawyer, professor, administrative law specialist, appeals court judge, and member from one bearing on securities law. An oath can be both economic folly and constitutional. To administer the oath, it is my privilege.
Thank you. I understand there is an intervening event.
Before we get to Justice Scalia, it's my pleasure to introduce Nancy Kennedy, Special Assistant to the President for Legislative Affairs.
I'm sorry, Mr. Justice. Well, I wasn't given a job to describe anything, but I will admit my pleasure and honor of having come to know Dean Reuter through the process that has brought us to this day, but I am here to deliver a message. Dear David, today is not only a special occasion for you and your family, but an historic one for the Securities and Exchange Commission. Nancy and I are pleased to congratulate you as you are sworn in as the 23rd chairman in the Commission's 53 years of existence. You assume this post at an important time for the Commission and at a sensitive stage for the United States and for the world economy. We have enjoyed years of resurgent economic growth, keyed in large part by strong investor confidence in America's financial markets and institutions. Maintaining that confidence is central to the role the SEC plays as the guardian of the public interest. When I announced your nomination on June 17, I made clear how fortunate I was to find a person of your caliber and experience to take up the reins of leadership as chairman. Now that the Senate has seconded my assessment and Justice Scalia is on hand to administer the oath of office, I want to express my particular thanks to you for providing at least one matter on which all three branches seem to agree. You're the man for this job. All of us look forward to your adding a distinguished term of public service to an already distinguished career of legal scholarship, practice, and education. Although Nancy and I are unable to be with you in person on this proud day, please be assured that you embark on this challenging new assignment with our admiration, our appreciation, and our best wishes for success. God bless you sincerely, Ronald Reagan.
Nancy
Nancy was one of the managers of my confirmation process about a year ago, so I'm delighted to yield time to her whenever she likes, even if not for a presidential address. It is not that long ago that I swore in Commissioner Fleischman, and many of those here may have been present at that event, in which case I apologize, because the only fee I charge for conducting swearings in is to say about what the process is. It is one of the old traditions in the government, and probably in any government. It's ceremonies. It does require federal officers and state officers as well bound to support the Constitution of the United States. In fact, the very first federal Congress, when it convened in 1780, second on this first that you will mention, which was simple act on the heroes of the civil was obvious.
And on the Bible and raise your right hand. I, David S. Reuter,
I, David S. Reuter,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same,
that I take this obligation freely,
I take obligation
without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion.
without any mental reservation or purpose,
I will well and faithfully discharge
and that I will well and faithfully discharge
the duties of the office on which I am about to enter.
the duties of the office I'm about
So help me.
So help me God. Justice Scalia, Senator Regal, fellow commissioners, family, friends, Northwestern colleagues, and members of the staff of the Securities and Exchange Commission. It is certainly a great pleasure for me to be here today. I have some prepared remarks, but I'm mindful of advice given to me by a colleague when I made a speech from prepared remarks after having conducted an informal briefing, and he said, next time, throw away your manuscript. So I will refer to this manuscript in part and add some comments of my own. This surely has been both the shortest and longest summer of my life. The shortest because the events of the summer seem to be somewhat of a blur. The longest because the confirmation process seemed interminable. I am glad that I may now begin my new duties. May I express my thanks to President Reagan for appointing me, to the fine White House staff which shepherded me through to the confirmation process, to the Senate for voting to confirm me, to the many SEC staff members who filled me with information necessary in order for me to respond to senatorial questions, and to my wife Susan, whose support has and will be invaluable to me. These are truly amazing times in our financial markets, and I view the role of the Securities and Exchange Commission as crucial. We must, and I'm delighted finally to be able to say we must when speaking of the Commission. We must ensure the honesty of the securities markets by vigorously enforcing insider trading and other anti-fraud provisions. We must insist that brokers deal fairly with their customers. We're doing all right on the manuscript, I guess. We must deal effectively with the intense activities of those involved in all phases of the takeover phenomenon. And unless legislation to the contrary is enacted, we must continue to follow the goals of the Williams Act of protecting the shareholders of target companies. In doing so, we should not provide special advantages either to bidders or to the management of target companies. We must continue a strong and effective disclosure system and deal with the problems in implementing EDGAR, the proposed electronic data gathering, analysis, and retrieval system. I gave our general counsel a test yesterday. I asked him to tell me what EDGAR meant. He stroked his chin and thought deeply and came up with the same words that I've given you, and if they're not right, well, we'll have another cram session for it. We must do so. We must implement EDGAR at the same time without imposing burdensome costs on issuers. We must continue vigorous oversight of the operation of the securities markets and the activities of the self-regulatory organizations. In so doing, we must understand and regulate the development of new financial instruments and guard against dramatic market volatility. We don't quite know how to do that yet, but we will be working on it. And at the same time, we must avoid stifling the best capital markets in the world. We must plan regulatory initiatives to deal with the developing internationalization of the securities markets, seeking to maintain our high standards for disclosure and fairness. But we must not drive substantial capital resources away from the United States. There are other areas which demand attention and which we must address, including securities activities of banks, the disclosure system for sale of municipal securities, regulation of investment advisors and financial planners who are managing the money of others, and the arbitration system for customer disputes with brokers. Finally, and I'm always glad when I hear a speech to hear that word finally, finally, I believe the time has come for the securities industry and the investing public to remember that the excellence of our capital markets in large part depends upon the integrity of its participants. Use of inside information, distribution of false financial statements, churning of customer accounts, and other fraudulent practices, of course, cannot be allowed to continue and cannot be condoned. But more important, the attitude that sharp practices are permissible cannot exist if the honesty and effectiveness of our markets is to be preserved. As chairman, I will ask private investors, institutions, and market professionals to look inwardly and recognize that in the long run, their own best interests, as well as those of the public, are well served by adherence to strict standards of integrity. And I expect to sound this theme often and in loud voice. The solutions to the many problems I have described will, of course, require ability, imagination, forcefulness, and cooperation. I am delighted to join a commission which has commissioners and staff, all of whom exhibit these fine qualities. Thank you very much. My first official act will be to adjourn this proceeding. Thank you for coming.